Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Have you ever had a toxic employee work for you? Let's talk about that. When we talk about workplace stuff, we always talk about like bosses and stuff, right? But really, the question here is, have you ever had people work for you, whether it's in your small business, big business, in an institution or a company or organization you were working with, whether it was an assistant or any employee when you were in a management position of any kind? Have you ever managed someone who's narcissistic? So this is tricky, right? Because this is a person who's reporting to you. By definition, they sort of have less power, but their narcissism is still going to be an issue. And it isn't always as simple as just firing them. In fact, it can get downright tricky if the narcissistic person who works for you is actually decent at their job or passably decent. A great example of this, though, could be sales. Narcissistic people are fantastic salespeople. They always close the sale. They can charm and charisma their way to a sale, right? But they are also acting like world-class jerks when they're not closing the sale, right? Their entitled behavior may be putting off folks who work there and ultimately maybe even the clients. So let's break down some of the things that toxic employees do. They do all the stuff that any narcissistic person does, right? They're entitled, they're victimized, they're unempathic, they're manipulative. They may triangulate and gossip in the workplace, creating all kinds of adolescent behaviors amongst the people they work with and make the workplace a toxic mess. It's like a high school lunchroom, right? They may be bullies, bullying the people they work with, or being rude to customers or clients or whomever it is that you serve at your place of work. They may be grandiose and have an overblown idea of how good they are at their job. They may sneer and feel that they are better than you and think that they shouldn't have to be accountable in the same way as everybody else. They can also be quite manipulative. I gotta tell you, I have worked with countless numbers of people who have said they had toxic employees who figured out the system really quickly and figured out just how far they could push it, but also what their rights were as employees, and then harnessing those rights to be able to get away with a bunch of stuff at work, but set themselves up in a manner where they were kind of untouchable, that it would have been very difficult to terminate them. And as any manager who has ever had to deal with a difficult employee, especially in larger organizations where firing someone can be quite difficult because of all kinds of liability fears, that you have to learn to sometimes endure these toxic employees because the risk management folks at your workplace are saying that it might be more expensive to get rid of them than to have their lazy, victimized selves remain in their positions. And what may happen then is that they become someone that everyone else has to work around and do the work of, and that can put added pressure on their colleagues who have to take up the workload and put up with the BS and honestly the unfairness of watching this person get away with this. Because of this, even though you may be more, on paper at least, empowered in a given situation by having a leadership role in this job, you still may not be able to go and probably should not go toe to toe with these toxic employees. Documentation is essential. Making precise notes on absences, times people come in and leave, workplace performance, deliverables, however the metrics of performance are kept in a given workplace. Toxic employees are the reasons that workplaces need painfully detailed employee manuals and contracts that people sign. So you're covered when things go wrong and you have documentation that they signed off on what needs to be done. So if they violate it, at least you got a leg to stand on. But somehow these are always the employees that find the loopholes and the wrong thing that you didn't manage to document in your contract. These employees are also exhausting. Over time, you find yourself walking on the proverbial eggshells. They're surly. Their frustration and the anger and the stress they may be causing others in the workplace is an issue. And this exhaustion and frustration will be compounded if you have little recourse to do anything about it. Make no mistake, if you do terminate them, the odds are high that they will pursue some sort of wrongful termination lawsuit. That's why that documentation is so important. In fact, some toxic employees are serial offenders, and in their fashion, rather well versed in labor law. So they know what to do to get paid out on settlements and the like from multiple employers. And because these judgments and settlements can be confidential, you may not know any of this when you go to hire someone. But in most cases, I'm talking about lawsuits and all this stuff, with toxic employees, it may not be quite that bad. It can also be someone who's mouthy, entitled, unreasonable, who takes no responsibility, who chronically makes excuses, who has a laundry list of rationales and excuses for why the thing they were supposed to do didn't get done. Or they are masterful at blaming other people and will happily drop a dime on an unwitting colleague. They will gaslight and tell you they did things that they did not do and paint you out as a micromanager when you double check. This actually can be quite dangerous if the kinds of things that this employee has to do may have safety implications. For example, in a healthcare setting, a manufacturing setting where there's heavy machinery, something that may involve security, such as locking up doors or safes or cash registers or setting alarms, or keeping an eye on vulnerable people like children or elderly people or pets even. Narcissistic people are by their nature often not very mindful or attentive. So as a result, if this shows up in an employee and if they have any kind of responsibility that can result in these kinds of safety or security risks, these employees become more than a nuisance. They become a major liability. Now, obviously, I'm sure watching this, some of you are thinking, well, it sounds like the best play is to not hire someone who's like this in the first place. Good luck with that, and easier said than done. An online application may not reflect who this person is. We know that narcissistic people can have really, really good masks on for an interview. They may be someone who was advanced through the system. Forget the hiring. They may have just been advanced through the system, been there long before you got there, and has been there for a long time. Just as we know from relationships, narcissistic people can actually keep it together for a long time. It may be that the first time they feel inconvenienced about the job or experience some kind of ego injury, or they're frustrated, or their insecurity and shame get pinged because they can't do the job, that's when you see it for the first time. But then, just as they come out of a probationary period, just when it becomes more difficult to enact meaningful consequences, bam. Some employers may even think, well, I'm not hiring them for their personality, I'm hiring them to get a job done. And that they may have the job experience or the skill set. Trust me, you will regret that. The fact is, personality is not a reason to fire or censure someone. That's not how the world works. You have to be able to document behaviors that reflect poor performance or a violation of what is permissible in a workplace. Even gossiping, even if it's the mean gossip, may not meet the line. If you are managing someone toxic, it's about documenting, having regular performance evaluations and being honest on them, and working closely with a workplace attorney to figure out how best to proceed so you don't make any wrong moves. Obviously, how you proceed in these situations is going to depend on your company, your industry, and your various policies. In fact, even the state in which you do business. Now, toxic employees, I believe, can actually be as harmful as toxic leaders because there's more employees than leaders, and there can be more than one. And when there is more than one, the effect of their behavior on everyone in the workforce can be pernicious. It can poison the well of large groups of employees, decrease morale, and be potentially harmful to the business or the safety of people who use that business or industry. And while simply dealing with employees' entitlement or employees who are chronically passive aggressive and victimized and constantly finding a way to blame others or foist their job roles on someone else, while all of that can be exhausting and deflating for everyone involved, the risks may be higher than you think. Sometimes the belief is, well, this person's under me. They can't fire me. They don't have as much power. How much harm can they do? Way more than you think. At the extreme, they may actively attempt to sabotage you. And at the milder end, they just may bring a toxic negativity into the workplace that affects productivity all around. But whatever it is, it may be far harder to manage than you ever dreamed. And no matter how big or small your workplace is, if you are dealing with a toxic, narcissistic employee, the main advice I have for you is to dot your I's, cross your T's, and always, always, always consult with a legal or HR person and document that. Or you may find yourself facing more consequences than the employee or the employees who are the ones who are toxic and engaging in antagonistic, manipulative, entitled, and divisive behavior in the workplace. Listen, folks, I have been at this point with toxic employees at various points in my career. And ultimately, the person who did the immeasurable harm, they're the one who wasn't fired. It was often me who ended up leaving the job. And it's just a quick one, just a reminder. Got that book coming out in February. Give it a look, give it a consideration, and give it a pre-order. Thanks again.